Today I want to talk about perspective and how you can use it to manage your life and your goals, right? So feedback that I consistently get from people that I work with, from clients or anyone that I support in some capacity is that I've helped them shift their perspective, right? I've helped them shift their perspective and therefore cause or create a different reality in their life, right? So perspective is everything, right? Perspective is everything. The way you choose to see something or not see something is going to determine how you feel and how you respond or what actions that you then take, right? So a shift in perspective in how you're looking at things versus how you were looking at them before, that can completely change your life. And I've got comments, testimonials day after day from clients, reaching out to me and saying, like for instance, Sandra is a client that I work with. I'm looking at something she sent me here about, I was reluctant at first, right? So she, like so many people, right? She was reluctant. And I'm sharing this with you just really quickly before we jump into this topic about the cookie jar too. But think about this in your own life, right? Where have you been reluctant to try something new, right? There's something that maybe you have a goal. Like for her, she had this goal to start a business and she works full time. And so she was, in that whole thought process of like, how do I start a business on the side? Will I make money? I've never done this before. How is this even going to happen? Is it even possible? Can you relate to that? Like that you have this vision, you have this goal that maybe you haven't even allowed yourself to really think about in a big way because you just don't know how it's possible. Well, this is where Sandra was. This is where Sandra was over a year ago when she first had this thought. So she was reluctant. She knew she needed support. She was reluctant to hire a coach and to invest in herself because she didn't even know if it was the right thing, right? So she didn't even know if it was the right thing. And so she sent me a message talking about how just in a few months of working with me, she said, you had me look at things from a different perspective that I didn't consider before. You had me look at things from a different perspective than I hadn't considered before. Now I'm feeling more confident, and I know that with your guidance, my dream is coming true. I now think so much bigger for myself, right? And the reality is today, a year later, she does have her online business. She does have a community that she's built. She is on a plan to actually exit her full-time job, right? And so the reason I share that with you is because perspective is everything, right? So at one point she was looking at how the full-time job was hindering her from pursuing this goal. And I had her shift her perspective into how it's actually supporting her and how we actually get to put things in place so that she achieves her goal. And it doesn't have to be the way that she thought it did. It doesn't have to be either or. Right? When you know that a result is coming, you can let go of controlling when it's going to come, right? So here's what I want to say to you about perspective, right? The idea about perspective, which I think is really, really cool, is I was reading David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. You guys have heard me refer to this. And it reminded me because this idea came up in his book too. He talked all about perspective in the last couple of chapters. And this is where we're going with the cookie jar. So it came up when I was reading this book, Can't Hurt Me. And it reminded me that all high performers and all people who completely transform their life, right? Who completely transform their life or turn lemons into lemonade, right? They have this ability to shift perspective about any situation in their life. And so when I'm up against something that I'm struggling to achieve, I remind myself of the things that I've achieved in the past, right? I remind myself like, okay, let me shift, so for example, there's something that I've been working at, right, in my personal life that is not happening as quickly as I want it, right, or is more challenging. And so I could get into this story of, this is difficult, you know, just forget about it, this isn't going to happen for me. However, because I know that my perspective on this is going to dictate actually what happens in the future, right? It's going to dictate what I start manifesting. We talked about this last week, and how I start finding more evidence to support that. I can decide in the moment. I have these mindset tools that I've trained myself on. I can decide in the moment to shift my perspective on it. And one way I shift my perspective on the fact that something is not happening as quickly as I want, or the way that I want it, is I remember the difficult things that I've achieved before that at the time did not feel possible. I remember how I quit smoking and never smoked again in my life after I decided to quit smoking at age 23. I remember how I completely transformed my physical body, and how it didn't happen overnight, right? It took a year, 2 years, right, to lose 20, 25 pounds, to adopt better eating habits, to then eventually decades later, or over a decade later, become a pro athlete. Like, I remind myself, the perspective is like, you've done it before. It wasn't easy in those moments. When you look back, sometimes you think it's easy, right? But you forget that there were the daily things you had to go through, you know, the mindset that you had to work on, the new habits that you had to adopt and practice, right? So the perspective becomes, okay, I'm going through this now. I don't get to control when it happens, right? But I get to focus on the vision of it, and I know that eventually it will come to be. I remember one time speaking to my business coach, and, you know, a lot of people in our circle have this, you know, we have our goals and our inspiration and our motivation for why we are having the businesses that we have. Mine really has to do with my big mission that I have, and I talk about on here often. Like, you've got to be pulled forward by a vision that's bigger than you and bigger than money. So even with that said, within this circle, there's a good group of us, you know, that have this vision of creating the 7-figure business, right? And my perspective on that, because I remember having this conversation with her where, you know, we were in a VIP day, and we were mapping out a plan for my company and when it would get to that point. And I said to her, what I know for sure is that my company will get there. Like, I just know it, right? I know how to set a vision, and I have learned how to let go of controlling exactly how it's going to happen, which allows me to take a lot of risks. It allows me to not be held back by fear or fear of failure, because I know that it is going to be. It's just a matter of time, because when I set the intention and then I start practicing the beliefs, the thoughts, and taking the purpose-driven actions that will align me with that, then I know it's just a matter of time. So I remember saying to her, it doesn't matter to me if it happens next year or the year after. It doesn't matter to me if it happens next year or the year after, because I know that it's going to happen. And I remember her reaction being like, that's really smart. Because often you get so attached, and tell me if this has happened to you, you get so attached to when something is going to happen, that when it doesn't happen by that time, you start to pull back, you start to give up, you start to not believe that it's going to happen. But the piece that you're missing is that we don't really have control over that. There are so many factors in life that come up, family things, health things, just whatever God has planned, because along the way, maybe there's more things that you need to learn in order to have whatever you end up achieving that much more fruitful, that much more effective, right? So releasing attachment to when something is going to happen, that's a shift in perspective. That's a shift in perspective. If you can know that you're being shaped along the way, and that you can let go of exactly controlling every specific aspect of it, that's when you get in the flow of being pulled forward by the vision and not trying to push. So I want to share with you this cookie jar story because I think it goes well with this. So in David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, if you haven't read it, read it. Among many things, he's a Navy SEAL and former USAF tactical air control, like all this like awesome stuff, ultra marathon runner, broke the world record in pull-ups in 24 hours. So he's very physical, right? Which is why I'm attracted to that, right? That's my lifestyle too. But everything that he does and has accomplished is all mindset. So really, more so than this amazing athlete and physical specimen, he is just a master at mindset. And he has grown up with some of the most, devastating, abuses. And, that is the story of so many influential people. That's why you can't get into your head about why you can't do something, become something, or be something based on where you started from. Your past has nothing to do with what you're capable of. And this is where the cookie jar comes into play. So in the book, he says, what do you say to yourself when life is kicking your ass, right? Just like we were just talking about, when you keep failing at things that you truly want, right? And so he says, when that happens to him, he thanks God for the test. And so you don't get hung up on the word test, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like, and you know what he's saying. It's like, being thankful that you're being tested, being thankful that you're being put on the battleground to actually, go through this, right? And so this is where he talked about the cookie jar. He says, I go back to what I call the cookie jar. The cookie jar is a place in his mind where he puts all things bad and good that has shaped who he is today. So think about who you are today. There's a process that I do with coaches when I'm training them, and we did this in my recent group VIP day, the prep work, right? Where you actually go through this process of unpacking, starting from now all the way back to birth, all of the things, all the monumental pivotal moments, right? And then there's a process of like finding the common denominators, and you get to this place from that assessment of what you actually are called to do in the world. It's part of connecting to your purpose as a coach. If you want to be a coach or you are a coach, let me know in the comments, and you will get this. This will make sense to you. The coach's journey is always one that was paved with trials, this is everyone's life, but the coach, typically somebody who is driven to be a coach, or one day wakes up and is like, oh my God, I am a coach. This is what I've been doing my whole life, or this is what everything has been adding up to and leading up to. When you look back and connect the dots, typically you've had to go through a lot of shit, right? A lot of heavy stuff, a lot of emotional things, a lot of loss, a lot of pain, whatever that was in your life. And it's through your transformations of those. It's through your choice of perspective with those things and how you use them. It's through those things that made you the person that you are today. It shaped you. Right? So what he says is, I have this cookie jar in my mind where I put all good things and bad things that have happened to me to shape who I am today. And he says, some people try to forget the bad in their life, but you can use that bad for strength when you need it, right? In the cookie jar, he says, I pull out whatever I need for the task at hand, right? Whatever he needs for the task at hand. So it's where you put all your great achievements and all your epic failures. I love the idea of also putting your epic failures there because it keeps us humble, right? It's easy to get cocky or to think you've achieved and you're already there after you've had a series of successes. But listen, life is success and failure. Life is ebb and flow. This is why, you know, so often people who have this perception of what success is, right? You see somebody who has succeeded, you know, you see the athlete, you see the business person, you see, you know, whatever it is or whomever it is that you look up to, and you're just seeing that. You're just seeing that, especially on social media, right? Everybody paints this picture of, you know, of the good, right? And you don't see the stuff that happens underneath or behind closed doors or all the bumps and bruises and failures along the way. This is why I think it's so important to be honest with your audience. You know, this is why it's so important to be real. No one relates to someone who is pretending to be perfect or who is portraying perfection, because it's not a reality. So I love that Goggins says, I look at the epic failures too, and I use that in that day or in that moment to help motivate me or whatever thing that he needs, right? Like it could be one of the good things that happen. It could be one of the bad things that happen, right? So whenever you need some encouragement, a good reminder of how awesome you are, right? Or of mistakes that you've made in the past so you can avoid repeating them and you can see your patterns, you just open that cookie jar, right? You just open that cookie jar. So here's something that I think I had an idea, and I think this is really cool, and I'm going to do it tonight. So I'm inviting you to do it with me. You know, I like to invite you to do these things with me. Last week or the week before, I invited you to the 1 more hour awake. Now I am officially just 10 minutes away from my 4 a.m. wake up time. Today I woke up at 4:10. It's getting easier and easier every day. I almost could just skip and wake up at 4 tomorrow, but I like to stay on the plan that I put in place. So I'm curious, if you also took me up on that challenge, let me know in the comments. And where you are today on your time. So here's the next invitation that I'm giving you. It's not a challenge, but it's an invitation to create a real cookie jar, where your cookies are notes. Your cookies are notes. So you can write on those pieces of paper all your greatest achievements and then all your epic failures. And the way that I'm going to do it, and you can do it for as long as you can remember, the way that I'm going to do it tonight to just start with is my 2019, the year so far, right? And I love this because not only do we have a tendency to forget how awesome we are and like what we have accomplished. You know how I was saying earlier, when I'm struggling with something, I remind myself of all the freaking things that I have accomplished and transformed, to remind myself that I have the capacity as long as I stick with it, right? But so we have a tendency to forget that, but we also have a tendency to become arrogant. And we got to be careful with that as high achievers. You never want to become arrogant after a series of achievements or feel like, okay, I'm there, I got it, I made it, right? Because that's when you're in for a rude awakening, right? When you get too cocky to where you think that you know, you're already there. Right? So don't get too full of yourself, because you want to stay humble. You never want to get lazy and rest on, there's nothing that drives me more crazy than the person who like rests on how awesome they used to be, right? How awesome I used to be, how I was in high school or in college, right? Our past accomplishments. Life is lived right now. Write that down. Life is lived now. It's not lived in memories. But what I love about the cookie jar is we get to use those memories of our greatest accomplishments and our greatest failures to help shape us in this moment and moving forward, to remind us of what we're capable of, and also to remind us of what we have a tendency to do that causes us to miss the mark. Because typically it's patterns, right? And patterns can always be broken. So this is a really great reflection to do. And I'm actually, like I said, going to do this tonight as a part of my evening ritual. In the evening, I have a ritual and a preparation that I do, which I'll share with you guys if you're interested in it. Let me know in the comments on one of these lives. Okay, so I want to hear from you. Are you going to take the cookie jar invitation? I don't want to call it a challenge, but it's an invitation for you to really reflect and look at where you can use those positive and negative times in your life to create perspective right now for where you're going in the future. Okay, so I love that we get to spend this time together every morning at 7 a.m. Pacific time. It's an opportunity for me to share with you some tips, some strategies, and really just some real honest talk about what it takes to live a high performer lifestyle, what that means, and how you get to on a regular basis, really challenge yourself to think bigger, to think differently, to think bigger and to think differently, to shift perspective so that you can shift and improve the results that you're creating in your life. Thanks for being here with me. Have an incredible rest of the day and a really powerful week. I'll see you tomorrow.